There is a moment in every dynamic, whether it's forming, fading, or confusing, where silence becomes far more powerful than any words you could say. It is not the silence of punishment, resentment, or games. It is the silence of self-possession. When you stop explaining yourself, stop chasing, stop filling the empty spaces with effort, something shifts. The energy reorganizes itself. She begins to feel the absence of your presence, your voice, your attention, in ways you could never make her feel by speaking or pushing. Silence is not withdrawal. It is a recalibration of who you are and the value you carry. When you go silent in the right way, you communicate something profound without saying a single sentence. You show that you are no longer seeking validation. You are no longer reacting to mixed signals. You are no longer trying to impress someone who hasn't yet recognized your depth. Your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back to her the space you once filled with your presence. And the more present, engaged, and emotionally intelligent you were before stepping back, the louder your silence becomes. Women feel energy far more than words. They notice shifts. They sense emotional movement instantly. When you go silent, not with coldness, but with calm, the absence of your usual engagement creates a contrast she cannot ignore. It makes her replay previous moments. It makes her remember how your attention felt. It makes her realize how naturally she had grown used to your presence. The smaller the things she once took for granted, your replies, your curiosity, your steadiness, the more meaningful they become when they're no longer there. Silence creates value where effort used to create noise. But the key is intention. Silence only works when it is grounded in your own inner alignment. You cannot go silent hoping she chases. You cannot go silent simply to provoke a reaction. That kind of energy is transparent and weak. The silence that shifts everything is the silence that comes from being centered within yourself. When you genuinely choose to step back, breathe, and allow things to unfold without grasping. It is the silence of someone who knows their worth, not someone trying to manipulate the situation. In that space, she begins to notice things she overlooked before. She notices how steady you were when she was uncertain. She notices the respect and patience you offered without pressure. She notices the emotional maturity that separated you from other men. And she notices the undeniable difference between presence that cares and silence that speaks. This noticing doesn't come from her ego. It comes from the natural human response to emotional contrast. The more real you were, the more your distance reveals. Silence highlights your boundaries. It shows that you are not available at any cost. It shows you are willing to walk away from anything that doesn't honor you. It shows that you are a man guided by intention, not impulse. And in that space of quiet confidence, she feels something she didn't fully recognize before, your value. Let silence become the space where your energy speaks for you. Let it be the moment she stops taking your presence casually. Let it be the shift that reveals what words never could. When a man learns to use silence with poise, clarity, and self-respect, he discovers the truth. Sometimes saying nothing is exactly what makes her start noticing everything. Silence restores a sense of mystery that most people forget they even possess. Because in a world where everyone is constantly talking, explaining, posting, reacting, and reaching, the person who can sit still and hold his own energy becomes instantly different. When you choose silence, not out of anger or withdrawal, but out of calm self-possession, you create a shift in the dynamic that she cannot help but feel. Your presence, once easily accessible and predictable, becomes something she has to lean toward rather than something that leans toward her. And it's this subtle reversal of energy that makes you more powerful without needing to force anything at all. Mystery is not about being distant or cold. It's about creating enough space for someone to wonder, to reevaluate, to feel the absence of what your presence used to provide. When you are constantly available, constantly replying, constantly filling the moments with words, you unconsciously reveal everything about your emotional position. She knows you're always there. She knows you're always attentive. She knows she can reach for you at any time and you will respond. But silence interrupts that pattern. It introduces a new rhythm she must adjust to. It makes her pause and pay attention. It makes her think instead of assume. And thinking is where curiosity is born. A man who can be silent holds an unspoken command over himself. He is not trying to rush the moment, not trying to prove his worth, not trying to secure her affection through effort. His silence signals inner stability. It tells her that he is grounded enough to not need constant validation or reassurance. It tells her he is not controlled by impulse or insecurity. Silence becomes a language of confidence, a way of showing that your emotions do not scatter at the slightest shift in hers. When you are silent, your presence becomes more intentional because it is no longer automatic. Every message you do send, every gesture you make, every moment you choose to engage carries more weight. She notices the difference between your stillness and your movement. She notices the meaning behind your responses instead of taking them as routine. Silence sharpens the significance of your actions because it removes the noise and leaves only the essence of your intention. The energy shift that silence creates is subtle but powerful. Suddenly, she becomes aware of the space you used to occupy in her emotional landscape. She starts to notice the absence of your voice, your curiosity, your warmth. This doesn't happen instantly. It happens like a slow awakening, where she begins to look for the connection she once felt effortlessly. And because you're not pushing, not chasing, not trying to force anything, she's the one who naturally leans forward. The balance of energy becomes more equal or even gently tilts in your favor as she begins to reach in ways she didn't feel compelled to before. Silence also gives you something invaluable, perspective. It allows you to observe the situation without emotional noise. You begin to see whether she values your presence or only your attention. You start to recognize whether she is genuinely interested or simply entertained. Silence reveals truths that conversation often hides. It gives you clarity about her behavior and your own emotional responses. When you stop over-explaining, oversharing, or over-initiating, you create room for her to express more. She begins to reveal her own level of interest through her actions and effort. You allow her the space to miss you, to wonder what you're thinking, to question where you stand. This is not manipulation. It is energetic balance. It is the natural result of pulling back into yourself and letting your presence breathe instead of suffocating under constant interaction. The mystery that silence restores is not about hiding who you are. It's about revealing who you truly are by removing anything that is unnecessary. And when a woman feels that shift, when she senses that you're no longer pouring your energy outward but holding it with intention, your presence becomes more powerful than anything you could say. Silence, when used with confidence and self-awareness, magnifies your impact without ever raising your voice. Pulling back calmly is one of the most misunderstood yet powerful moves a man can make, not because it manipulates someone else, but because it clarifies everything: your intentions, her interest, and the true balance of the connection. When you step back with composure rather than anger, and with self-respect rather than ego, you instantly shift the emotional tone between you. It's a withdrawal of excess energy, not affection. It's a resetting of boundaries, not a punishment. And it's precisely this kind of serene detachment that creates an emotional contrast she cannot help but notice. People become desensitized to what is always available. It's human nature. When you are always the first to reach out, always the one initiating, always offering emotional availability on demand, your presence blends into the background. She may enjoy it, appreciate it on some level, but she doesn't feel it with intensity. It becomes predictable.
But the moment you pull back, not with cold silence, but with grounded stillness, you create a gap in the emotional rhythm she has unconsciously gotten used to. This gap is what makes her suddenly aware of what you provided before. Emotional contrast is simply the difference between presence and absence, attention and quiet, warmth and neutrality. Without contrast, nothing stands out. With it, everything becomes clearer. Pulling back calmly is a statement of self-worth. You're not retreating because you're hurt. You're not disappearing to provoke fear or insecurity. You're simply recognizing that the energy exchange is uneven and choosing to stop pouring into something that isn't meeting you where you are. This communicates strength without a single word. It shows maturity because you're choosing peace over pressure. It shows confidence because you're willing to give her space without clinging. It shows emotional intelligence because you understand that connection cannot thrive when one person carries all the weight. When the pullback is done with self-respect, the energy stays clean. There's no bitterness in the air. There's no reactive cold shoulder. There's no passive-aggressive silence. You simply redirect your focus back into yourself, your goals, your peace, your inner world. That shift in attention is what creates the emotional contrast she feels. She notices that you're not overgiving. She notices that you're not chasing moments that feel forced. She notices that you're no longer bending yourself to fit into the spaces she leaves open. And in that noticing, something wakes up inside her.
The dynamic is no longer lopsided. You're not hanging on her responses. You're allowing things to flow naturally. The beauty of a calm pullback is that it highlights authenticity. It exposes whether she genuinely values you or only values the attention you provided. If she is truly interested, she will feel the shift and begin to step forward. She will initiate more, ask more, open more, because now she feels the importance of your presence rather than merely expecting it. If she wasn't invested, the silence simply reveals a truth you needed to see. This kind of emotional contrast brings clarity to both of you. It allows her to see that your attention was meaningful, not mindless. It shows her how considerate and steady you were when she had it. It makes her reflect on how she responded or didn't respond before. And reflection is what deepens awareness. Awareness is what awakens desire. A calm pullback is not about disappearing or playing games. It is about creating a space where mutual effort can exist instead of one-sided giving. It is about letting her feel the value of what you brought to the connection. It is about letting your absence speak where your words no longer could. And when done with quiet confidence, it heightens her awareness of you in ways force or persistence never could. When your silence is paired with inner confidence, something shifts in the emotional atmosphere between you and her. Something subtle, powerful, and impossible to ignore. Silence on its own can be misinterpreted as insecurity, retreat, or passive frustration. But silence supported by genuine self-assurance becomes an entirely different form of communication. It becomes a quiet signal that you are not waiting for permission to be valued. It shows that your world does not collapse when someone else becomes inconsistent. It expresses that your sense of worth is internal, not dependent on her attention. And this combination of calm distance and rooted confidence is what naturally makes her start to notice and feel your absence in ways she never did before. Inner confidence changes the meaning of your silence. Instead of appearing withdrawn, wounded, or uncertain, you appear centered. You appear in control of your emotions instead of letting them run wild. You appear to be honoring your own standards without needing to explain, justify, or demand anything from her. This form of silence has a grounded energy that speaks louder than messages, calls, or attempts to impress ever could. It is the silence of a man who values himself enough to step back gracefully when the dynamic is no longer aligned. And because that kind of internal strength is rare, she feels the difference instantly. When she senses that your silence comes from a place of calm strength, it affects her differently. It doesn't trigger defensiveness and it doesn't push her away. Instead, it creates curiosity. It makes her wonder what shifted inside you. It makes her question whether she misunderstood your availability. It makes her replay previous interactions and search for the moment when the energy changed. This curiosity turns into awareness. Awareness becomes emotional recognition, and emotion is what drives all attraction. A confident silence doesn't try to force her to notice. It simply removes the noise so that she can feel what was always there, but overshadowed by your constant engagement. When you were always present, always responding, always available, your value was easy to overlook, not because she didn't appreciate you, but because she didn't feel compelled to think about it. Humans respond to what stands out, not what remains consistent without variation. Your silence creates that variation. It introduces a space where she can feel instead of assume. Confidence also ensures that you're not sitting in silence, anxiously waiting for her reaction. You are living your life, protecting your peace, pursuing your goals, and maintaining your emotional balance. This separation of focus is what amplifies the effect of your absence. She senses that you are not clinging to the connection. She senses that you are not emotionally dependent. And the moment a woman realizes that your emotional state is not tied to her behavior, her perception of you changes. You become someone she respects, someone she thinks about, someone whose presence she realizes she misses, not because you demanded it, but because you allowed her the space to feel it naturally. Your silence becomes the place where she actually experiences your value instead of just observing it. She notices how steady you were, how intentional your attention felt, how effortless your conversations once were. She feels the contrast between your presence and your distance. This contrast awakens appreciation. Appreciation leads to desire. Desire drives action. When your silence is rooted in inner confidence, you're not disappearing. You're allowing the truth of the connection to surface. If she is truly aligned with you, she will move closer. She'll reach out, check in, open up, or invite conversation because she feels the shift. She feels the absence of the energy you once brought. And because that energy came from a man who knows his worth, she cannot help but respond.